Fantasy gets startlingly complex at times, doesn't it? These worlds with their rich histories and weird natural laws, the magic systems with their codexes of rules and applications. Don't get me wrong, that level of depth is a wondrous thing, and really, more often than not, I am a glutton for it. But sometimes, I just want something easy, natural, intrinsic. Sometimes I just want magic to feel as uncomplicated as breathing. And recently, I read a story where that was very literally the case. In the book Imagica by Clive Barker, there is a magic called Pneuma, which in Greek means breath. With it, the fabric of reality can be altered by something as simple as an exhalation. When the book first introduced it, something about it felt so familiar and so right, I had to look into it. And what I found took my breath away. It may not be the most important part of the tale, but it is one of the more interesting bits. A big thanks to Audible for helping to make this video possible, and to all of our Patreon supporters as well. We love you. As a story, Imagica is not terribly simple. It's got realities parallel to ours, an eldritch void separating them, megalomaniacs on both sides trying either to close or barricade the gap, echoes of selves in different worlds, predestined paths, genocide against the gods. The list goes on. But there are two key forms of magic in the setting that I find fascinating to compare. One is performed by savants called maestros, who, through meticulous and artful rituals, are able to travel the Imagica, the spaces between worlds, and work all manner of miracles. The second kind, a character blows into his hand, and things happen. Literally, it is no more complicated than that. In this world, breath from the right breast for the right reason can transport you across dimensions, split glaciers open, obliterate people where they stand, collapse an entire city block and threaten the rest of the skyline surrounding it, and then be drawn back into the lungs from which it came, taken back in as easily as it was released. Pneuma. More magic contained in a sigh than in any number of rituals or incantations. It's an important thread in the story and something fairly unique to one of the protagonists, but still blessedly simple. A sort of intrinsic magic that comes from within. No need for gods or complex mechanics. It is what it is. It works how it works. At one point, when the protagonist uses it accidentally to kill something and starts to wonder how it happened, a more knowledgeable character says, in the plainest possible terms, "How else would you have done it? You had the will and you had the power. You've always had it." This is far from the first story I've read with magic of this nature. Harry Potter, X-Men, Avatar: The Last Airbender, the examples of this intrinsic power thing are countless. But I think what I'm noticing about this particular case is that it's not something fundamentally special about the protagonist. I mean, it is. Not everyone produces pneuma when they breathe, but also, as long as they're alive, breath is something every human being possesses. This magic isn't based in something pseudoscientific or supernatural. It's based in something human. I love that. It feels like a reversal of what so much magic in fantasy is. Rather than something grand and numinous made small and quantifiable into a system, it's something small and simple elevated to the status of magic. I'm sure there are other aspects of humanity authors have done this with, but breath is a particularly interesting choice because it comes loaded with significance. Breath is ethereal. You can't see it, but when you bring it into your lungs, it somehow translates into life, forming a bridge between the unseen world and the physical. It brings calm and control and self-mastery. Obviously, we know the science behind this now, but it doesn't take a lot of imagination to understand how that metaphor emerged. It's even in the language that we use. Inspiration, aspiration, the word spirit itself, all of them come from the Latin word spiritum, which means breath. To be inspired is like taking in a breath of air. An aspiration is like an anticipatory breath caught in your chest. Like breath, Spirits are the life that fill the enfolding flesh. Mankind has been thinking of it in these terms for a long, long time. Long enough to develop culture and philosophy surrounding it. Look to the Chinese and you find qi, a form of vital essence not only comparable to breath, but in some measure controlled by it. In India, you find prana, another form of life energy called the inner breath by some, which permeates all things and is a key stepping stone to higher meditative states. I find this so beautiful because in these philosophies, breath almost becomes a conscious tool. Using it in this way gives you the means to interact willingly with the incorporeal. Honestly, this is about as close to magic as we get in the real world. So is it a surprise to see that some fantasy has already keyed into it? I mentioned Avatar: The Last Airbender earlier. Well, we have someone here to help explain exactly how perfect an example of this Avatar is. Our good friend Tim from the YouTube channel Hello Future Me. Tim?
In Avatar, breath is an important part of firebending. From almost the first episode, we have Iroh telling Zuko that firebending comes from the breath, not the muscles. And that's because truly powerful firebenders have self-control, mastery over their bodies and mind, and don't resort to anger. This is also why one of the most powerful expressions of firebending in the series is breathing fire. When Aang and Zuko meet the dragons later on, they learn about how firebending is about life and light, drawing on that kind of divine power to breathe life and light into the world. Breath is also an important part of airbending because airbenders can regulate their body temperature purely by controlling their breath. Fundamentally, the ability to control your breath is the ability to not give in to anger, into panic, into these emotions, but instead, mind over body is a part of mastering this magic. It also pairs really well with spirituality and meditation, which are often connected with breathing exercises. So in a way, spirituality manifests as power in Avatar.
Magic controlled through breath, breath as a symbol of self-mastery. To control the self is to touch the ineffable. Beautiful. But Pneuma is different from that. Pneuma is strange. For early Greek philosophers and anatomists, it was a missing link, the key to understanding the connection between body and soul, divinity and flesh. It wasn't a magical tool one might use to engage with the incorporeal, it was simply the substance that bridged the gap. A far more anatomical and far less spiritual application of the breath metaphor. The first reference to this I could find was in the writings of Alcmaeon in 500 BCE. He was studying cadavers at the time, trying to trace the sensory organs back to their apparatus within the body to see where the senses came from, how they worked. Somewhere along the lines, he made the determination that inhaled breaths enter and circulate through the arteries in the form of what he called pneuma, a kind of blood-borne breath. If you think about it, it's actually pretty accurate. Weird how things like this come full circle sometimes. But things got far more interesting when Plato picked up the idea. There's a lot more, we'll call it philosophy, in his approach. He had a dualistic view of the soul, thinking of it as something separate and distinct from the physical body. This perspective has been called the ghost in the machine, which, as much as it reminds me of a certain anime, I really do love as a title. But the question is, how would it operate the body? How can something intangible flick the levers to operate the machine, so to speak? This is where Pneuma comes in. He saw the interaction of body and soul as the result of a metabolic process. Inhaled air was a kind of spiritual energy which emanated from God, that is Zeus, and was transformed by the organs into a sort of intermediate material called pneuma, which eventually reached the brain and became the soul. Like many thinkers of his time, he believed the nerves were hollow and saw them as a means by which a purer, more rarefied form of pneuma might be diffused into the body, thereby animating it. So incorporeal substance goes in, is transformed by the body into an intermediate material, which goes on to deliver instructions for what the corporeal body does. Pneuma. Breath literally becomes the soul. Aristotle had a much different concept of pneuma. He had a more materialistic view than Plato. He saw no meaningful distinction between body and soul, calling it the mere activity of life, just as sight is the activity of the eye. To him, the whole was the sum of the parts, Having a soul was what made an organism an organism. Without that, it literally could not be. He called this unity the psyche, the essential form of every living thing. If something could at the very least reproduce and consume nutrients, you could tell it possessed one. On the other end of the scale of life, there were beings like humans and gods who, in addition to a psyche, also possessed phantasia, the ability to imagine and rationalize. And of course, between both, he described Pneuma. Unlike Plato, he saw it not as the material of the spirit, but rather as a form of animating energy, something which he called vital heat, which imparted the ability to move and experience sensations. Thus, he reasoned, anywhere life existed, there must have been some presence of this heat. They still believed in spontaneous generation back then, that life just appeared out of nowhere, so when worms randomly turned up in the mud, or fish in the sea, or maggots on a carcass, there must have been Pneuma around. Even for humans, he blamed conception on what he called connate Pneuma, carried in the male seed. This is the second video in 3 months where I've mentioned the male seed, isn't it? Not really a record I wanted to set. Thanks, old-timey male philosophers. Gross. The last, and perhaps most mystical of the Greek Pneuma theories, came from the Stoics. Just like Aristotle, they too thought of it as a sort of animating energy. But they also thought of it as something far bigger. Pneuma was to them the physical material of logos, which is a term that means logic, order, reason. It was the wind which carried that vital heat to all things. But because of the disparity of life forms on Earth, they also thought that there must be a variety of different Pneuma which do different things. A Pneuma of state or tension which gives things form, probably an early surrogate for gravity. A Pneuma of life force which provides the ability to reproduce and grow. A Pneuma of soul which brings movement and the powers of perception. And then finally, a Pneuma of rational spirit which makes intelligent life capable of judgment. This is one of the most inspiring takes on the topic to me because it implies that the soul is an external influence. It's out there, mingled with the rest of the universe, and you're simply taking it in. Your breath becomes you. The breath metaphor is beautiful wherever it shows up, but this breath not just as a tool, not even really just as a metaphor, but as the actual anatomic bridge between body and soul? I feel like there is so much room to dream here. And that's what Clive Barker did with Imagica. He simply answered the question, if Pneuma creates you on the way in, what does it do on the way out? There, he found magic. And you could too. A good place to start might be with the book itself, which you can listen to for free with Audible. Audible is amazing. We use it constantly for our research and, honestly, just to relax. You cannot always make the time to stop your life and get absorbed in a book, and audiobooks are outrageously expensive. Audible has been an incredible solution for us, allowing us to handle all the things involved with running a channel like this while listening to our favorite stories and plenty of new stuff we would never hear anywhere else. If you liked this video and you want to see some of its ideas in action, use this as an opportunity to hear Imagica by Clive Barker for free. Sign up for a free 30-day trial by visiting audible.com/talefoundry or by texting the code TALEFOUNDRY to 500-500. The Audible original for this book is one of the best I've ever heard. Simon Vance's performance adds so much tonality and depth that you just wouldn't get reading the text with your own two eyes. And when you're done with Imagica, that's not the end. There'll still be plenty left to experience. Audible Premium will also give you access to Audible Plus, an absolutely massive collection of select audiobooks, Audible originals, podcasts, and more. Pay less than $15 a month for Premium, and you get Audible Plus for free. Or, if you really just want access to the spacious Audible Plus catalog, you could just choose to pay half as much and use that alone. Whatever's best for you. Again, to get your free Imagica audiobook and experience Pneuma firsthand, sign up for a free 30-day trial by visiting audible.com/talefoundry or by texting the code TALEFOUNDRY to 500-500. Links in the description. Once you listen to the book, Please come back and leave a comment about it. I would love to know what you thought. Before we wrap up, I'd like to give a quick thanks to all the helpful humans who support the show on Patreon. All those words you see scrolling in the background of these videos, those are actually the names of our Patreon maintenance crew, without whom this show would be impossible. And a special word to all of our top patrons, Lord Gate, RPG Grenade, and the Autumn Rider. Thank you so much. And that's it for this video. There's usually a few weeks between uploads, so if you want more Tale Foundry in the meantime, come join our community. We have a Discord server that's basically like a big family of creatives, a lot of love there. We also run writing groups on Twitch every week if you want to get some practice in. They are a ridiculous amount of fun. You can find links to all of it in the description. Hope to see you there. Until then, thanks for watching and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next time. Bye!